let's start with the topic that's kind of top of mind right now, because the World Cup is coming to America, and 11 cities particularly throughout, from Seattle to Miami and New York and Boston and Philadelphia, Kansas City, San Francisco, LA, and more. And there's a lot that's going to go on our TV screens and in those stadiums that we're all going to see, but there's so much that's going on behind the scenes with social organizations, with police departments, and that's where trafficking and special events comes in. Can you fill us in on the amazing research you really started, I think, with regard to the Super Bowl and trafficking?
Sure. There's a bunch of conversations about human trafficking and Super Bowls and big events. Part of it is about how the places and spaces are created for those special events, right? Is there labor exploitation? Who's building those? That's one conversation. The other conversation tends to be about sex trafficking. Are girls and women brought into those venues, those cities, for the purpose of the pleasure of men to buy sex from them? And does it happen more often during those events? NASCAR, Super Bowl, golf events, and so on. And so what our research found, we did it over about a 10-year period, very intensely for 2 Super Bowls, found that there was not an enormous leap for a couple of different reasons. One, each community of these 10 communities is talking about trafficking now before the games start. That means enforcement has started, eyes on the field, and traffickers know that. They know that around those special events, people are paying attention, and they're likely to go elsewhere during those events now, which is a great deterrent. We appreciate that very much. The problem that remains, though, is in each of those 11 cities, trafficking happens every single day. Local victims, local traffickers sell to local people every single day. So men, money, events, all predictive of having a little bit more trafficking, but the reality is it's every single day in every single city.
So the headlines we've been seeing, headlines about what Miami-Dade's doing, what Seattle's doing, you think, you're observing that you think there's a deterrent effect that it has?
I think there's kind of a give and take. There's a deterrent effect in the sense that the community is much more aware. When the Super Bowl came to Phoenix in 2023, we trained 5,000 volunteers. So many more people knew about the risk factors for trafficking, to look at relationships with people walking into the venue. They took that knowledge to their church, to the restaurants they frequented, to the parks. And so the awareness in my community went way, way up around that special event. And so that's happening in all those 11 cities. And again, we're really grateful for the attention to it. The problem that we run into is when those games leave, does that attention wane? Does the resources for victims, dry back up? In all those 11 cities, they didn't all have trafficking specific resources until now.
Back when you started looking at the Super Bowl, and one of the great things I enjoy about your work is you're not just an academic. You are in the field. You are a clinician, and you went into the field for the Super Bowl at the Meadowlands in New Jersey. Tell us about that and what you were looking for and what you found.
So as a researcher, I work with a bunch of different police departments. Right now, my relationships are with the Tucson Police Department, the Phoenix Police Department, and the Las Vegas Metro Police Department. And their work is really, really important to the field of human trafficking. And what we learned from New York, right before the Super Bowl in 2014, the New York area made a decision that they weren't going to wait for the Super Bowl to happen. They were going to arrest as many people as they could who were in prostitution situations. They were just going to shut down the business the most they could, which showed that they were active, but what they didn't necessarily do was have resources for those over 100 women that they arrested that night before the Super Bowl. So what we do with law enforcement is we ask them to be innovative. We try to be creative and thoughtful in our partnerships between social services and law enforcement. And there are many ways that we can innovate without arresting a person in prostitution. What we know about people in prostitution is 9 out of 10 of them were trafficked as a child or are being trafficked now. So when we think this is sex work, that we think that it's independent, that is simply incorrect. So what we do in our community is we work with law enforcement in a bunch of different ways. Once a month, we do a no arrest night with them. When they do a sting with law enforcement, pretends that they're buying sex, and people selling sex will come to a hotel, and instead of being arrested, we'll wrap them around with services. We also 4 times a month or 5 times a month go into the jail after arrests for prostitution and provide direct services to those persons being arrested for prostitution. Again, 9 out of 10 of them are being trafficked or were trafficked as a child. So we're able to bring that information right to them, exiting opportunities. And that's our most important goal, is to not arrest people, but to give them a different path.
For sure.
In 2020,
I spent 25 years with a gun and a badge. And so, you would think that I would tell you, hey, arrest is the way to go, but it's absolutely not. And in fact, I've seen successful partnerships in my own FBI career with groups that you're affiliated with and others that come alongside and not only train the sheriffs and the police officers to say to a trafficking victim, you're not under arrest tonight.
Right.
What do you need to get out of this right now?
Right.
And then here comes all of the service offers that you've mentioned. That works the most. And then once you develop that trust, maybe law enforcement gains some intel on who is doing the trafficking. That's where the FBI would come in my observation. And so you said a couple of things that are very interesting and I bear repeating, which is, I think so many Americans have an image of what they call sex work from the movies, and particularly the movie with Julia Roberts and Richard Gere, Pretty Woman, and that it's glamorous and it's lucrative and that it's done independently. And tell us again how wrong that is statistically.
What we find in our work, we survey women who are in jail, in prison here in Arizona. We work with our community of young adults, 18 to 25-year-olds, and we find that the vast majority, 9 out of 10, are in that situation because they have no other choices. Either they're being forced to do it, maybe they're traffickers in jail and they have to keep doing it to keep up the life that they have and give them the money that they owe them each day, their quota. We work with child victims who are as young as 11 or 12. We have victims who are in their 60s still being trafficked. So when we glamorize this idea that sex is for sale, we really miss this opportunity to say, if someone is in a situation where they're selling sex, what are the other things that are pushing them that direction? And the reality is none of us want our daughters, our mothers, our sisters to be in a situation where they have to sell sex for someone else. And so if we aren't willing to put our loved ones in that situation, how can we kind of sit back and glamorize it and really not understand the complexity of it?
You mentioned juveniles and how this often starts at a very young age. And I think even some of your special event research was looking for kind of the language around advertisements for sex that clued you in a kind of algorithmic way as to, hey, this person more likely than not is a juvenile that's being trafficked, or this is an adult that's being trafficked. Tell us about that kind of research and how it's being applied in the field by police departments.
Absolutely. So we do research with Las Vegas Metro Police Department, super smart, super innovative police department, really at the cutting edge of innovation. And what we learn from that work is that out of thousands of cases of human trafficking, specifically sex trafficking, traffickers are specialists. They work with either children or adults. There's rarely traffickers that do both, which is pretty important because that determines how you do your policing, how you approach it, and also how we design our services. They're very, very clever in their approach to figure out who traffickers are. What we really want to do is show victims that the community cares about them. And the best way we do that is actually to arrest and incarcerate their offenders. So when we look for minors, we look online, we look on social media, we look on the street. Law enforcement is out there making sure that if they identify someone and we want to know if they're a child, that we can identify that. Some important things, though, that there is a pretty big distinction between trying to buy sex from a 6-year-old and trying to buy sex from a 14-year-old. And so we seem to be looking for sort of different predators. So pedophiles or prepubescent adolescents, people who are attracted to that age group is kind of a different group than what we work with in sex trafficking. Those are child abusers, child sexual abusers, and predators. Those people who are buying sex from children, and they don't really care if they're 18 or 15, right? They're just looking for someone to buy sex from. That tends to be the group that we're looking, those sex buyers that we're looking for. Traffickers, on the other hand, are opportunistic. They're going to figure out whoever they can sell, whatever that looks like. They'll sell, anyone in their life. These are people with very little restraint about how much harm they do to other people.